Hi there, I'm Lisa-Skye and welcome to Unable to Put Up With Your Ableism. I am on a panel with three other queer identifying artists. We have Beth and Jacci and Erin, and being queer identifying and being all artists, we're broken.
Broken is not the best word. And I think we should look at why it's not the best word. When we say broken, we're talking about the fact that we are all experiencing disability in some way. When we talk about disability, and certainly in the context of this panel, but in general, we are generally referring to the social model of disability rather than the medical model. Now, the medical model is probably what you're used to. It's things like you go to the doctor says, oh, you're disabled. The social model of disability, however, says that what disables us isn't necessarily our bodies, but how society treats us. And what disables us is society not allowing us to access parts of it. And that's kind of what the social model means. And we try to avoid words like broken because it implies that there's something wrong with us. But actually that's not true. We're just different. We have different needs.
Unless you want to reclaim the word broken.
Which you totally can.
It kind of puts us in a walled garden of our own making. If we refer to ourselves as broken, I remember I have depression, obviously, I'm a comedian. Fun fact, when my psychiatrist diagnosed me, I said, no, this is unacceptable. It's such a cliche to be a comedian with depression, and I will not have it. And he said, we can call it something else. I'm like, do not patronize me. But then when I was diagnosed with ADHD or ADD, I forget which one, she said ADHD-edly. I think it's ADD. Anyway, that just made so much sense to me and all of my coping mechanisms and stuff, because this was well in my 30s that I was diagnosed. But I didn't come out as having ADD or ADHD for a very, very long time because I'm a performer and I'm also a producer, and I was terrified people would see me as unreliable. Yeah. And if you've ever worked with me, you'll point at me and laugh until you're unconscious to think of me as being disorganised and unreliable.
Literally the most
organised, Dad's got it together.
Always there, reliable person I've ever met.
Yeah. And how about you, Beth? What do you reckon?
So I've written a show all about my journey with borderline personality disorder, or BPD for those who love an acronym. And I'm a big fan of disclosure. I'm a very oversharer type of person anyway, and I sort of see, oh, this is arrogant, but see myself as sort of like being on the front line of like, as if we own and own and own and own and own, it'll get so boring that we don't, it's not even a thing anymore.
It's not arrogant because you're literally on stage owning it.
No, I just mean like, because this is new territory, it's untrodden, it's kind of like I'm the pawn that's copying a lot of the flack, and you do see the way people change. I'm a big believer in speaking from your scars, not your wounds, and so you have the obligation and the responsibility as someone who happens to be dealing with difficult things in your life to manage those in the best way that you can, and that is your responsibility. And then from that place you're kind of unstoppable and very powerful, because nothing that anyone can say to you, you haven't already said to yourself and dealt with. That's kind of how I've gotten to where I am. It took a lot of work to get here, and for many, many years I knew that I wasn't ready to do this show, and now I'm like, dare you to judge me. And it's a really, really exciting way to be doing art.
I love that phrase, speaking from your scars, not your wounds.
It's the filter that I put my work through. Yeah.
I have a badge that says weaponize your broken bits. Yeah. Because the fact that I have ADHD, or the other one, I need to check. You really do. Folks, the fact that I, can multitask and have to do a million things at once is great for a producer. And so, Jacci, what are your experiences?
Well, my show labelled, which is now labelled Part 2, which was mainly launched in Darwin and the Northern Territory and in previous years, so I'm new to Melbourne, is all about, it's very similar to what Beth does, I assume. So, same concepts, like about owning it and disclosing. I like to say that I'm normalising autism. One of the things that I found interesting when I first started doing comedy was everyone wants me to stand with a microphone rested on my chin, and when I see Hannah Gadsby do that, and I know she's now, now disclosing that she's on the spectrum, I think, geez, that must be hard, because for me, I need to stim. So now stimming is something with autistic people that is a coping and a self-soothing mechanism that we use. I was with my boss the other day.
So wait, stimming is?
Stimming is sometimes I do this, So I pace. There's a whole range of different stims that we have. It's a way that we actually think through our body is how I relate it. I was with my boss the other day and we were trying to think of something. It was really intense brainstorming and I found myself going like this. And she's laughing and I'm laughing. I'm like, I feel like I'm extracting the thoughts out of my brain and it's a physical representation of it. So I'm getting bolder on stage with being fully aspie, fully autie, fully autist on stage, and that's challenging for the audience because people say to you, I know I've had one woman say to me, I wish you'd stand still. I want to be my whole authentic self on stage.
But also that's such a gatekeepery attitude of like you have to stand still on stage when that isn't possible for a lot of performers.
And then you see comedians who pace up and down.
And somehow that's okay.
It's okay, but how is it not okay when I'm talking about it from an autistic perspective?
It's that thing which it kind of links back to what you were saying about as soon as you disclose what you are, it actually puts the spotlight on what are your perceived limitations, and people therefore want to box you in more. And so again, I think it comes from awareness and ownership, and I actually kind of wanted to do this show so that I could just get it out of the way and move on and create space to just make art that has literally nothing to do with it. But first I had to own that story, have that conversation, challenge those perceptions, and then let's all move on.
For me, that's really interesting because disclosure isn't something that I get to think about because I use mobility aids and I'm very visibly disabled. So disclosure isn't something I think about at all. And that has its pros and cons. On the one side, I get to not think about disclosing. On the other side, it means people have made up their minds about me before hearing me speak or talking to me or anything like that. And one of the things with being very visibly disabled is, with the art scene especially, is not many venues are accessible. And even if the audience area is accessible, the stage won't be. And especially now, because now I'm transitioning from using a walking stick to a walking frame, that has removed a good 60% of places I can go, and definitely places I can perform.
So how else do you think people are doing ableism in subtle ways that they might not know that they're doing?
I mean, I think a lot of it just comes down to not thinking about it, right? Whenever I ask, and this isn't even just venues that I'm performing at, it just ask anywhere, oh, are you accessible? It'll just be dunno. Or my favorite one is when they say, oh yeah, and then you get there and there's a step. Or my other favorite one, which is, yes, we're wheelchair accessible. And I'll be like, cool, do you have a disabled toilet? And they'll go, oh no. And it's that one especially galls me if it's a pub. You want me to go drink. But then anyway. But in terms of the more subtle things, I actually have it pretty easy because I am articulate and well-spoken. And so people will listen to me in a way that I know they don't listen to my comrades who are have speech difficulties or speech differences. People with intellectual disabilities aren't listened to in the same way I am, because there's a lot of that kind of bias that carries into it as well.
Do you think there is a way of shining a light on these blind spots, and if so, how?
I think we're doing it now.
Interesting that you use the phrase blind spot.
Oh my,
that's...
Oh yeah.
Well, again, we just talk about it often through the frame of ableism, because, but I personally think that's fine to start where the status quo is and slowly but surely start to chip away and deconstruct those expressions and terms and question them. But you've got to, I truly believe, as frustrating and difficult it is, that this is our burden, sure, but you just come to people where they are and then you gently hold their hands and you invite them to come along to where you are.
And don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
Because I just said blind spot. We are all works in progress.
We're doing our bit.
It is so entrenched in our language, and that's when my show Labelled is about the other labels, the more subtle labels that are applied to behaviour, because I don't want to use clinical labels in the show. So I use the subtle behaviours. I mean, the things that were applied to me was, difficult, different, but the context by which it was applied. But I mean, the thing in my family was, there was an expression, don't do that, you'll kill your father. So it was actually, I know, don't do that, you'll kill your father. So one of the first labels in my show is killer. because clearly I was a killer.
That's really interesting because I got that about being trans, is that same kind of attitude. And that's especially important, I think, to recognise considering the percentage of autistic people who identify as trans
non-binary,
or something like that
huge.
is so much higher than the rest of the population.
That has been Unable to Deal with Your Ableism. I'm Lisa-Skye. Thank you to Erin, Jacci and Beth.